Now, what time were you here to get front row seats?
Oh, 4 o'clock. No,
Wow.
no, not that. 4:30. 4:35.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are enormously excited for tonight, and I promise you I will not take up too much of your time. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are here, of course, in Treaty 1 territory, and the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Niniwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, the homeland of the Red River Métis. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. In case you're unaware, Anna Olson is here, and we are completely thrilled to have her here. She is here, of course, to discuss her new book, which is a bit of a swerve, at least publication-wise, not talent-wise. Anna cooks 125 plus delicious and achievable recipes for every meal of the day. We're so grateful to Appetite by Random House for publishing this book and making this evening a possibility, and so delighted that Eva Wasney of the Winnipeg Free Press has come on board to host this event. I will get off stage immediately, but just before I do, I wanted to quickly mention how the evening will proceed. There'll be a conversation to my left, and then there will be an opportunity for you folks to ask questions. So please do allow those to kind of percolate over the course of the evening. When it does come time for the Q&A, I'll approach you in a non-threatening manner with this microphone, just to ensure that everybody who's watching at home and everyone here can hear your question as well. I will be back at the end with some thrilling notes about signing procedures, so please do stand by for that. The only thing I will put in your head right now is we will ask you all to remain in place and listen to me while we safely transport Anna over to the signing table to make sure that it can begin once we are through. But now it's been since 2018 was the last time that we welcomed Anna here to this space, and anticipation has clearly been growing because we've, I believe, greatly expanded the number of people that were here for that event. That was for Set for the Holidays. This is for Anna Cooks. Your host this evening, Eva Wasney, is an award-winning journalist for the Winnipeg Free Press, where she writes about food, art, and creativity. She is the author of a best-selling community cookbook, Homemade, Recipes and Stories from Winnipeg and Beyond, and is co-author of the paper's food and drink newsletter, Dish. Anna Olson is a professionally trained chef and the internationally known host of Food Network's Canada's Bake with Anna Olson, as well as the Oh Yum with Anna Olson channel on YouTube. She is the author of 10 best-selling and award-winning cookbooks, including Anna Olson's Baking Wisdom, Baking Day with Anna Olson, and Set for the Holidays with Anna Olson. She lives in Ontario with her husband, Michael. We're delighted she's here tonight. Please give her a raucous welcome.
Very happy to be here and see all your smiling faces. And since the last time I was here, the eyeglasses are new. You'll notice I don't wear them on camera because I need them for reading. I need them for driving and seeing people at a distance, but cooking is my sweet spot. For now, I don't need glasses when I cook.
That's great. I'm excited to talk to you about your new cookbook and home cooking and everything that means to you. But first, maybe let's talk about your overarching goal with this cookbook. It's a little bit different than some of your previous publications and maybe a little bit of a different, it leans into the savory territory, maybe more so than people might know you for your baking and your expertise as a pastry chef. So what was your goal with Anna Cooks?
Well, Eva, I think I have a two-part answer to the question. And part one is, this may be surprising, but I don't eat cookies for breakfast. And with all the baking that I do, I try and eat a balanced diet. I cook with the same ingredients we all cook with. I watch my budget, and I like to eat a colorful, varied meal selection. And so this book stems from that inspiration, the way I like to cook and eat at home on a regular basis. But also part two to that answer is my publisher and dear friend, Robert McCullough, head of Appetite at Random House, my husband and I, when we published the In on the 20 cookbook in 1999, we shot the photos on film. We were his very first book when he became a publisher. So we have this bonding and we can have very frank discussions together. And he was the one that also pointed out the fact that my last few books have been really focused on baking, especially Baking Wisdom was intense. So maybe it's time to kind of step back and lighten things up and show people my, I don't think it's appropriate to say my salty side, but my savory side.
And it seems to me, just based on your introduction and just some of the way you describe the making of the book, that this was a bit of like a process of self-discovery for you as well, like kind of investigating how exactly you cook at home. And so I'm curious what you kind of realized through that process, or like maybe learned about your preferences or your style that kind of translated into the book.
That's a great question, Eva. And I think about it for a moment. I think the easiest way to explain it is this may be a question I hope everyone raises their hand. Who here likes to bake? It's the way you bake is different than the way you cook. It's linear and it takes your full attention, and there is a relinquishing of trust. So if you follow the technique, and also when it comes to baking, you've got a limited scope of ingredients. Take butter, eggs, sugar, flour, and you can do thousands of things with it, depending how you treat those ingredients in what proportion. But once it goes into the oven, it's out of your hands. Cooking, on the other hand, has an unending list of ingredients and some fundamental techniques to apply to them. And so it's a little more of a wavy line process, but you can also, it's more fluid in that you can work with it. As you're creating, you can change as you go, which you can't do so much. So I like the freedom of cooking. I can spend all day baking, developing recipes, and cooking dinner is a release because it's just a different side of my brain. And so I think that's what came out and was my own exploration when I documented meals that I was preparing at home. And looking at that range of ingredients, especially, is what struck me. And it struck me most when we were going through the edit process, because you'll notice in my cookbooks, I include the volume measures, imperial measures, and I include metric weights. Well, I have a standardized form of all my baking ingredients in metric weights. Well, this book added another, I don't know, 50 to 100 new ingredients I had to document the weight of, because that is simply the savory world. There's a lot more variety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned cooking at home, and you and your husband Michael are both chefs and you've been longtime collaborators. And I'm curious how that kind of dynamic works in the kitchen, because there's some recipes in this book that are his recipes as well.
I give him full props for the contributions, and we do cook together. The general rule in our house is common to a lot of households with two cooks, is whoever gets home first starts cooking. And sometimes if you don't know what to cook, you chop up an onion, you get it sauteing in the pan, make the house smell good while you figure out what else is going to go in the pan. But yes, there's definitely a collaborative element. And so you'll see influences based on both of our cooking styles. Definitely come through.
Yeah, and do you have kind of specialties that you like to cook at home and that he kind of takes over? Like, is there a division of certain dishes or anything like that?
A little, I'd say more when we're entertaining.
Okay.
When we're just cooking at home, cooking for each other or close family, anything goes. But when we're entertaining, we hosted Thanksgiving a couple of weeks ago, and he's the meat man. He just goes right for the proteins. And that's what, when we cooked together, that was, and before I went when I became a pastry chef, we were cooking together, and Michael would do the butchery and the sauces, and I would do what's called the entremetier, which is your starches and vegetables. And then desserts got added into the mix. So we still lean that, we just fall into our old roles in the kitchen, and fall into that. So I jump on the side dishes and the desserts and the breads, and he gets all the glory with the turkey and the big gravy.
So this is a big cookbook. There's more than 125 recipes in here, and it covers everything from breakfast to appetizers to everything in between. And there's also a very wide variety of cuisines as well. So I'm curious how you kind of pared down what you wanted to include and where you kind of drew inspiration for some of the recipes.
That is a big question, because that's the hardest part. And when you write a book outline for a cookbook, it's like writing a 125 item menu. And so you can't have too much overlap in technique or ingredients or repetition, because that's not original. And because it takes over 2 years to write a cookbook, that outline is not static. It keeps changing and moving, and when I get about halfway through, I look at the second half of recipes on that outline and wonder, well, why haven't I jumped on those yet? Is there something wrong with them? Is there something wrong with me? Deep fried dishes always seem to get pushed to the end, so I get excited about them when I put the outline together, and I end up eliminating, because who here deep fries a lot at home? Yeah, exactly. Air fryer, oh yeah, pull out the air fryer. You know, so I look at that carefully. Well, if I'm thinking about a recipe going, oh, I don't want to have to clean up the mess from deep frying, well, then I know you don't. And so I'll maybe cut and edit. When we had to cut, when I submitted the manuscript, we had to cut about a dozen recipes from it, just to make room for the content and the explanations. I think that's where my baking descriptors come in. The recipes aren't meant to be long as in arduous or difficult, but I just want to be very clear in my instructions. And so that can take an extra page here, or those side notes can add a little bit in content. And you've got a page limit. There's a certain limit, and you're told you have X number of pages. Otherwise you go to the next price bracket in the cost of actually printing and binding that book. So you have to make practical decisions. It's like, you can't go over your weight limit on your suitcase when you check your bag.
That's a good analogy.
So you gotta stop.
Yeah, and you mentioned just the kind of recipes that these are. They're not difficult, but they're also not like very simplistic. There's some complexity to them. And the word on the title or the front of the book, delicious and achievable, is how you're describing them. That word achievable kind of stuck out to me. I'm curious why you use that to describe kind of the ethos of the book.
Well, you have fantastic questions. Well, I felt it was very important to say that, because especially if you know me as a baker, or maybe you don't know my style of cooking, you might look at my recipe for French macaron and go, well, whatever she cooks, it's going to be ridiculously difficult, like a macaron. And it's not. I wanted to offer a balance, and I wanted to not just present a cookbook that was the basics. If it was something basic, like my tomato soup recipe, I wanted to share with you what it was that I thought was special about my tomato soup, that to share it with you. You can compare it to your own and decide which you prefer. But I also wanted to help inspire looking at common ingredients in a different light and pairings. A great example is I am a big fan of a complex salad. And by complex, I don't mean complicated, but a really good salad. If you want a main course salad, it needs to have texture, it needs to have visual impact, it needs to have complexity on the palate. So a good salad should have bitterness and sweetness and saltiness and creaminess and crunch, and just a lot of busyness, because it's a salad. And then the dressing brings it all together, you add your protein, and you should feel just as fulfilled eating a salad for dinner if it's well developed. So there's a big chapter on soup, salads, and sandwiches. And I really lean on the salads and the side dishes in this book, because we can all grill a piece of chicken, we can all cook a piece of salmon in the pan, but getting creative with the sides, without adding heavy sauces can be where we get a little stuck. Cause that's where I get a little stuck.
Totally.
And then sometimes my best results are cleaning the fridge. You know, you find, okay, I have 2 grapefruits, I have an avocado that's going kind of spotty on the counter, and I have some tofu that's gonna be past date in 2 days if I don't do something with it. And then that ends up being my crispy tofu avocado grapefruit salad.
Right, yeah, that's great. And I'm a big fan of a big salad as well. Like the more components, the better. And that kind of leads into another question I had. Could you please explain what DLTSY means?
Every recipe has that, is that called an acronym?
Yeah.
Acronym. Every recipe has that little acronym, and it is defined on the back cover. So you don't have to go searching too hard into the book to see what that stands for. But quite simply, it stands for don't let that stop you. Because I don't want any, you look at a recipe and you go, well, I don't have hazelnuts. I don't want that to stop you from making the dish if walnuts or almonds will work suitably. Or I'll guide you to say, well, use almonds because they've got the similar texture to hazelnuts, but I'll steer you clear of walnuts and pecans because they're too soft, depending on, that's just a random example. If it's an allergy sensitivity, if you're short on time, if you want to be able to make it ahead and chill it, can you do it? I like to share those little tidbits that are the bit of motherly, sisterly advice to just not give you an excuse not to make the recipe. And another highlight feature of the book, that this isn't intentional, it's a nod to how we look at things these days, but it's the thumbnail table of contents. Because we look at everything, you know, anyone go on Netflix or Prime in the last couple of days? You pull up the screen and there are all your show choices. Well, I figure you flip through the book and you can look quickly and see, okay, well, I have that, or I'm in the mood for that, and decide to make it, as opposed to, you know, we value here in this great bookstore our words very much, but the pictures say so much.
And cookbooks, I mean, pictures of food are such a big part of it, right? And there's so many beautiful pictures of food. So that was a very nice, and I haven't seen that in a lot of other cookbooks. So it's kind of a bit of playing with the form a little bit.
And I think it's become our signature thing. We did this first in Baking Day at the front of the book, and then in Baking Wisdom, we did like it, but we applied it at the beginning of each chapter because the book was so big. Does anyone have Baking Wisdom? It weighs 5 pounds. That's the first thing when I got the book. I had to weigh it to see what it costs to ship to people. God, that's gonna be a lot. But yeah, we split it up so it wasn't overwhelming at the front. But I like having it at the front. That's how I pick my recipes. When I'm going to share through an event or a cooking demo, I go right to that table of contents.
That's great. And the don't let that stop you acronym also kind of speaks to the wavy line you were talking about before of how cooking is kind of like going by feel, doing like playing with what you have and experimenting. And you do a lot of encouraging of readers to experiment with what they have and kind of tailor the recipes to their preferences and even go off recipe in ways. And I'm curious why it was important for you to include those kind of prompts for your readers.
Well, I think for cooking, even more so, I've always been encouraging when it comes to baking that, you know, the recipe is there to share the technique, but you do have flexibility within it. So when it comes to cooking, of course, I want to give you as much flexibility as possible. And also there are certain habits and ways you like to cook where you're comfortable. And I don't want to break you away from that entirely, which is why things like putting your olive oil in the pan before you start cooking. I don't know the size of your pan, and you may put half a teaspoon of oil in the pan and you may put 3 tablespoons. If a drizzle means a little or a lot to you and that's what you're comfortable with, if it's not going to impact the recipe and the results that I wish you to have, I'm gonna let you have at it. An onion. I'm not gonna be so specific to say 1 cup of diced onion if a medium onion tells you all the information. And if it's a little bigger or a little smaller and it's not gonna matter, then I think that's where that freedom in sharing a recipe, but assuring that you're going to have a tasty result at the very end is key.
It's a little bit of trusting your instincts. And
Yeah.
Going from
Yeah, I already know you've got the foundations, and if you don't, there are lots of recipes to start with to guide you through, and the simpler the ingredient, and there is an essentials chapter. So I share my recipe for a basic cheese sauce. To make a chicken stock, I've got 2 recipes for homemade mayo. Mayo is a big topic because a lot of us buy store-bought mayo, and I'm finding the ingredients are getting longer and longer and longer on the side of the jar, but people can get squeamish about making a raw egg mayo. It also, if you're going to make a raw egg mayonnaise, has a very short shelf life, and you're under pressure then to use up this 1 cup of mayo you made. You may only want it for a few sandwiches or a recipe, where I have a recipe for mayonnaise that uses hard-boiled egg yolk, and it works. It emulsifies just as fine, and by cooking the egg, you now just greatly extend the shelf life of it. And I even have a recipe for a vegan mayo. It's a tomato mayo. Fundamentally 2 ingredients, a pint of grape tomatoes, and then neutral oil. I tend to use sunflower oil at home, and you use an immersion blender, and between the acidity in the tomato and the pectin that's in the seeds and the skin, it beautifully emulsifies it, and you get this tomato flavored mayo that is just the best on a BLT.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like the
Yeah.
perfect application for that. Just back to the kinds of recipes that you've included, because this is a lot of stuff you cook at home, but it's also, there's recipes that are inspired by your travels as well. And so how does traveling kind of inform the kind of cooking you do at home?
Oh, very much so. Well, traveling is about not just connecting with land and place, but with people. And having meals in restaurants or with people is the best way to learn about a culture. My husband and I host culinary tours. And so a lot of the recipes that you see that may not look originally Canadian or from Southern Ontario, it's possibly because we traveled abroad and learned from an expert in that place. So the pide is an example. We traveled to Turkey a couple of years ago and learned how to make the flatbread and learned how to use ingredients that weren't a part of, I'm Slovak. Aleppo pepper did not figure into my flavor profile for many years. And I love Aleppo pepper, and I really got hooked on using dried mint because I'm a big fan of fresh herbs. Oh, always use fresh herbs whenever you can. Dried mint is a separate ingredient from fresh mint and has a different place. And I love that excitement. It's, you know, the older you get, the fewer new things you come across. So when you find something like that, it's just so thrilling. And when you can build a comfort, I just want to be able to share that. So that's my wish in the sort of international influences of these dishes and flavors. We were lucky enough to travel to Southeast Asia a few times. Malaysian food is just divine. And so I created a noodle salad inspired by this coconut spicy soup called laksa. But I thought, I don't think I could do the laksa justice without having all of those particular ingredients, but I could pull it together in a different form through this salad dish. So I get really excited about that. If you are interested, if you check out my website, I always list the culinary tours we have coming up. So we just got back from Piemonte 3 weeks ago. That was delicious. We found a truffle. We went truffle hunting as a group. Just a quick note, we travel in small groups. 16 people is our max. So that way we can fit on a small bus. That way we can go to the little villages. Have you seen the size of some of those roads? But we can get into the better restaurants, and we get in behind the scenes at producers. So our spring trips, we have back to back. We're going to Croatia. We're going to base ourselves in Dubrovnik, and we're going to do part of our trip on the seaside, exploring the seafood, and then we're gonna go inland and explore the pastry culture and kind of the old world food and flavors. I'm so excited about that. I've been to Istria before, but I haven't been to Dubrovnik. And then we are going to the Amalfi Coast. It says, when you look at the descriptor, it says from Rome to Amalfi. We pick a common meeting point where all of us flying from across Canada can meet easily. Rome works. So we land there one night. If you want to stay in Rome longer, our tour coordinator, he's based out of Calgary, can help you with that. But we're essentially meeting, having dinner, and then let's get out of Dodge and get ourselves to the Amalfi and Sorrento coast. And we go to a buffalo mozzarella farm. And so this is where the passion for these ingredients and seeing them, I'm always reminded when we go to Italy, simplify, 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 because we tend to use pasta. Pasta is our, well, in our house, it's our default clean the fridge dish. It's like, well, I have a bit of this and I'll add a bit of that. When you go to Italy and the simplicity of pasta carbonara, or I have my, in this book, I have a recipe, I call it Amalfi spaghetti, because the first time we visited there, you've got the scent of lemons in the air, and every restaurant has this simple dish. It's spaghetti with their local tomatoes. They don't even put basil in it. It's parsley and garlic. So what I do, it's my, like Tuesday night, I don't know what to make. I've got tomatoes, I have garlic, I have spaghetti, and I have a lemon. And I put a couple peelings of lemon in the olive oil before I start doing anything. And then you throw in the garlic, and in the time it takes you to boil your spaghetti, you throw in the tomatoes, and they barely soften, and a handful of parsley, and you're done. And that's it. And it is, but just that little edge of the lemon zest makes you think about the holidays.
It's nice to be able to connect with places that you've gone and come home and be able to kind of recreate that in your own way.
I think we all love doing that. You come home, you've had an amazing vacation, and you also, you call yourself into question. You're like, was that dish so good because I was looking at a sunset? And, you know, was that wine that delicious? Because I've done that. I've made that mistake of vacation wine. You're like, that wine was incredible. And then you get home and buy it, and you're looking out as the snow is blowing sideways. You're like, it's not as good as I remember.
It's setting makes a difference sometimes.
Big difference.
On the topic of simple meals, there's a lot of one pot, one pan recipes, which I think is very popular because people are busy, and it's nice to just not too many dishes, as you mentioned before. So I wanted to try some of your recipes, and I made your chicken cacciatore over the weekend. It was great. It was delightful. One pot, easy cleanup. But I also wanted to talk to you about that recipe in particular because it's two recipes in one.
Yes.
It's chicken cacciatore, but then with the base, you can also make chicken chasseur,
which means the exact same thing, Italian and French.
Yeah.
So it's essentially the same dish, where you take chicken thighs. It's a tribute to the hunter. Chasseur, cacciatore means hunter. And so the idea is, okay, originally it wasn't made with chicken because the hunter, I mean, you're not going out hunting for chickens. It would probably be rabbit. But while you're in the woods, you would collect mushrooms, herbs, and make this dish. So in the Italian form, it's got red bell pepper, a little heavier leaning on the tomato, you put olives in the end, a little bit of oregano. Chasseur, exact same preparation, same proportions. You take out the pepper, you double up on the mushrooms, you replace the oregano with tarragon, and instead of a splash of white wine, you would add a splash of brandy. And it's the exact same dish, but tastes completely different. So you can lean on these dishes differently depending on your mood, and twist. Like I have a roasted chicken mole. So it has cocoa powder, this Mexican inspired dish, but I use medjool dates to sweeten it and thicken the sauce. So it's done in a fraction of the time, but the depth of flavor that you get, that the dates add, I think is really nice, and any excuse to work a little extra fiber into our diet. But it brings up a point though, I am a big fan of prunes, on that note. I think they're just, they get a bad rap, and I do include a prune dessert recipe, a classic French recipe, but far breton in there. stray for a moment. When I'm creating recipes, when I'm actually focused on the testing, because this book isn't based on me cooking dinner and then scribbling down what I wrote. I do it deliberately. I have a process, but I do it alone. And the key thing is because I have to do my own dishes, baking and cooking. And it's amazing how when you're a pastry chef, and I look at pastry chef recipes all the time that have 8 different elements to it, and you each require a different set of tools, and then you look at your sink and you've used everything in your kitchen and you think, well, was that really worth it? Because now I'm gonna spend as much time cleaning as I was cooking. If I can do it more efficiently, I will, so long as it doesn't compromise the end result. So that's part of the process. And then when I've created the recipe and I'm happy with it and I've typed it, and I'm terrible at typing. Thank God for spell check. When the Grammarly went down the other day, when the internet went on walkie, and I sent out a few emails before I realized that my spell check wasn't picking up on my mistakes, and I had to write apologies. It's like, now you know I'm terrible at typing. But I have recipe testers who then test my recipes, and I give them no photos, no notes. If they don't know what the dish is, of course they should look it up if it's something that has context. But then they have to produce it, and they send me photos and questions. And this is where I get the flags of questions. They ask me the things that you might be asking me. If you make a batter and I say pour the batter, and you're looking at it and you're like, but it's so thick, I have to spoon the batter. Is that have I made a mistake? Or do I need to clarify my terms better? And so they're very good at, and I've worked with them for years, so very blunt and in their terms. No, but that's their job, to make your job easier in the kitchen. It's question. Clarity is underrated.
Yeah, and recipes are like there's a scientific process. There's methodology, there's ingredients, and to mix them properly to get the result. Yeah, you have to be quite clear with it.
And I appreciate how because I studied to be a chef first, and then I went into baking. So I found my cooking training influenced the way I bake, and then vice versa, my baking influenced. And as I mentioned before, I found this sort of freedom in cooking. And I was getting to a certain point right now, and it just went twing. And I was talking about clarity. What did I start at?
We were talking about just the recipe development process.
The process.
Coming from a pastry
I'll come back to it.
All good. And so on the topic of baking, this isn't an entirely savory book. And I mean, it probably wouldn't be an Anna Olson book without some baking and sweets and things like that. And I imagine a lot of the folks here are pretty avid bakers, confident bakers. I'm not. I am pretty, like the process is a bit intimidating to me, and I'm curious if you point to some recipes or have some advice for people who are looking to up their confidence in the baking realm a little bit.
Eva, thank you. That just reminded me where I was going to with my earlier point, which is I understand what it is to be out of your comfort zone, because my hobby, this sounds so domestic, but I love sewing. And now that I have 2 granddaughters, now I love sewing even more, but I appreciate how that is not my milieu. So I have the pattern, I have the sewing instructions. Apparently, if you follow all the instructions and the pattern, you should end up with outfit X. That doesn't always happen. So I can appreciate that you have the ingredients, you have the method, it doesn't always come out the way you thought it would. So on that baking question, in this book, I tried specifically to include dessert and baking recipes that don't require a wide scope of tools or ingredients, because there might be lots of non-bakers who pick up this book. And so a lot of the recipes can be made by hand or at most electric beaters. I am not sending you out, you don't have to have a stand mixer for this book. You don't have to have extensive Baking pans, just kind of your basics. You could go to Dollarama and buy a muffin tin if you wanted to, and still complete these recipes. I think a great example in here is the apple slab pie. So this is a recipe that feeds 16 to 20 people. And a lot of you might be saying, well, that would have been helpful 2 weeks ago. It's a sheet pan apple pie, but the dough itself is a hybrid because a lot of people have FOP, fear of pastry. And they just think, you know, stop, done. I am not. My producer of Bake with Anna Olson, 100 episodes, she still has FOP. It's like, girl, come on, haven't I tell you anything? But if you've got that barrier, you've got that barrier. This is made like a cookie dough by hand. Cream the butter, a little bit of sugar. So it's not as sweet as a sweet dough. It's not quite as flaky as a pie dough, but it sits somewhere in the middle. The joy is, A, you make it by hand, B, you don't have to rest it or chill it or figure out when it's right. You just mix it and you roll it and you put it in the pan and you put apples on top and put your crumble on and you're making it.
Love it. That sounds up my alley. That's great. And I wonder, just talking about like cookbooks and how long these take to produce. You said you've been working on this one for about 2 years. Do you have any plans for future cookbooks? Is there anything in the works there?
I'm already halfway through the next one.
All right.
But you have to wait until fall 2027. Mark that date down, John. I'll be back in 2 years. So with my publisher, we said, okay, we'll go back and revisit baking, but this is going to be more of a nostalgic book. You have to keep this secret recording live. Reasons to bake. And so there tends to always be a motivation. Sometimes it is nostalgia, comfort, an occasion, but it's always about sharing the reason we bake. And so it's getting at the heart of that. And I will be, just so this isn't just to get you to sign up for my newsletter, but I do have a monthly newsletter. I don't haunt, and monthly, once a month, I don't haunt your inbox. You won't see my name keep popping up. I'm going to put a call out because for years, you've let me share recipes with you that I want to return the favor and have you share recipes with me. Because when I do events like this, I have so many people come up going, oh, my grandmother has the best shortbread recipe. I think one of the best was, it kills me, but my mother-in-law makes the best fruitcake. And she brought me a sample of it in the recipe. And she's like, I don't know what it is she does, but it really is the best. And so I want to showcase about a dozen of my readers' recipes, and I will take them, translate them to a consistent format that an editor will review, and just we can share them with the world together. So that's something to look forward to. So we're gonna put that call out probably early in the new year because my manuscript is due early March. And we wanna do it, this is where most people don't realize it does take so long to do a cookbook. So if I put that call out and then you don't hear from me for a year and a half, it's because it just simply takes that long to go through the process. So we'll do it close to submission so I can work it. And within each chapter, just a nice mix of recipes. That'll be, I think, a fun addition.
Absolutely, yeah. On the topic of audience participation, maybe we can open the floor up to some questions if folks have some cooking or baking questions for Anna.
Could be any question.
Or anything.
Personal question. You may not get a true answer, but worth a shot.
Who would like to kick things off? Right in the front row.
Yep. Hello. I'm just wondering about your baking cookbook that I just purchased. How hard is it to convert them to gluten-free?
Oh, very good. And am I seeing it down there that it's baking day?
Yeah.
You will find baking day, well, all of my books, I flag clearly, and just like in Anna Cooks, you'll find there's a whole list of all the recipes that are either vegetarian, vegan in the case of the cooking, vegan adapted, or gluten-free. And there are quite a few that are quite clearly marked and with any of the variation notes within the body of the recipe. And so Generally when it comes to gluten-free baking, it is so much easier than it was a few years ago because the gluten-free baking products are so much more readily available, more affordable and better quality. I am not sponsored by any gluten-free brand whatsoever, but I know when I test gluten-free, I usually try using a few, and I like Bob's Red Mill's 1-for-1 baking blend and cup for cup. It's a blue package, you can order it online. The only difference is they both use brown rice flour as their base. Cup for cup has skim milk powder in it, which skim milk powder is a protein that bonds well, which is why it's found in that baking blend. It's what's used in a lot of Greek yogurt that is not actually strained yogurt, but they'll add the skim milk protein, and that's what makes the yogurt thicken up. It's also the secret to stabilizing whipped cream, which is a different topic. So if you're baking for a vegan, you just have to be aware of that. But so many of the cheaper ones would use soybean flour, and it just doesn't have a pleasant taste to it, where I find the flavor of those two very, very nice. And recipes that are batters that are wet by nature lend themselves to gluten-free baking, like a gingerbread cake. You pour boiling water at the end, because sometimes gluten-free blends can have that grittiness to them because of the rice flour. It's a different makeup that they absorb the liquid and hold together. And of course, chocolate recipes are the easiest to adapt to gluten-free baking because the chocolate sets and holds everything in place.
Thank you for handing this nicely to me. I'm just curious, first of all, my friend next to me over here is the one who invited me, and I just want to say thank you. When did you realize your love for cooking? And can I just say, I burnt myself on my stove just for you. But when did you realize your love for cooking and baking? How old were you?
I was little. And I think for a lot of people who, especially on the baking side, there's someone who influenced you. And for me, it was my grandmother, because that was how she expressed herself. Cooking and baking for her family. And then if you wanted to visit with grandma, because grandma was cool because she made some cool stuff. My mom would be the first to tell everyone she doesn't cook. But my grandma cooked so well that I would go hang out in the kitchen, and if you were in the kitchen with grandma, she was going to put you to work, and it just happened organically, and that's how we bonded. And I love that I'm just starting to do that. My little granddaughters are 4 and 2 now, so we have the toddler towers, and now the little one, Lori, out came the sprinkles at Thanksgiving, and so she hums "Sprinkle, Sprinkle, Little Star" while she bakes and adds. And I realized that the older one is the cook, because any ingredient you give her, she puts all of it in the bowl, where Lori is a little more deliberate and a little more measured, and she, even at 2, just adds and stirs and adds and stirs.
It's impressive.
Yes, and the control, but she can pound on her sister like no one else. She's a real little brute. She stands up for herself. Love that. And they're both going to be purple bees for Halloween. It was very specific. No, I want to be a bee, but yeah, purple works, right? And I sewed the costumes, and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be a project because I have to find fun fur that's black and purple. And sure enough, doesn't Fabricland sell by the roll black and purple striped fun fur that I am still vacuuming up on my floor after making the costumes.
Good evening, Anna. My question is specific to Anna Cooks. And you talk about focaccia being a very easy bread to make. And you selected to make a sweet potato focaccia.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Because I do want to try it. So I'm curious why you chose sweet potato as that base ingredient in the focaccia.
Oh, thank you. And I really like this recipe. And it's interesting, having just returned from our trip to Piemonte, I was reminded how the focaccia that we see on Instagram these days, with the big bubbles and the super folding, and while beautiful on Instagram, is not how they make focaccia in Italy. It's that more cakier, softer style dough. And it doesn't call for a cup of oil in the recipe. I find the Instagram ones, while lovely, I tried playing with one and I went through $7 in olive oil in this one recipe. And it was greasy at the very end of it. I wanted to make a focaccia dough that could be predictable, and for a novice bread baker who wanted to start bread baking, but maybe didn't know how to read all the signs, because that can be very daunting at first. Sourdough is tough because it's the simplest ingredients. It doesn't even have yeast. You have to make your own yeast, and then you add your flour and your salt and all the steps. So I wanted something that was a little more straightforward, that you could think about making it and in the same day be eating it. And so instead of having to boil sweet potatoes, mash them and work them into the dough, which I found was making, I was starting that way, was making a very stodgy dough. One of the first, when you first start making breads, one of the novice mistakes we all make is we tend to add too much flour. We think, oh, it's a sticky dough, I'm gonna add more flour, and you end up with a dough that doesn't move because it's too dense. So what I ended up doing was, in this recipe, you peel your sweet potato and you grate it into the dough raw. So what happens is it's a comfortable dough because you do work a lot of flour into it, so it's not sticky at first, but that sweet potato starts breaking down and letting off moisture as the dough rises. So then it's the right consistency when you get it in the pan. And I love leaning towards seasonal flavors, so that's why I put the garlic and the thyme in there, because it just works with all those fall flavors. That was an interesting question. I hope an equally interesting answer.
Hi, Anna. You mentioned that you don't eat cookies for breakfast, but I'm wondering if you did, which cookie would you choose?
That's a great question.
And then I'm also wondering, given the cost of everything nowadays, what are a couple of ingredients that you would say we should splurge on and not cut corners?
Oh, those are two very, very good questions. I'm gonna hold off on the cookie for breakfast answer because I need to think of that in the back of my head. But the cost of ingredients is definitely a key concern, especially when I look on the baking side of things. Oh my gosh, between the nuts and the chocolate and the vanilla and the butter, this is why testing for me is so important, because if you're going to invest financially into a recipe, I want it for you to turn out. Vanilla's a great example because I love vanilla, and if you watched, and now they're repeating my old sugar episodes on Flavor Network. Oh my God, that hair. And they put so much hairspray in that because that was live to tape. So we couldn't stop mid-tape to think, you know, you can't touch your hair on television. That's a golden rule when you're cooking because you'll get emails. So I used to free pour vanilla in whatever I was making. And now with the price of vanilla, that's not happening. So for the vanilla answer, part A, if I can cut back, I would rather use good quality vanilla in a half portion than a full measure of artificial vanilla. But on that side note, I am deliberately looking to different ways to add flavor. Like I don't bother adding vanilla anymore to my chocolate desserts when I'm creating a recipe. I can't do anything about the ones I created a few years ago, but because vanilla is added to chocolate when they make it. So it's already factored in, and I figure those flavors are big enough. I lean towards other flavors like citrus zest, because vanilla is all about giving you flavor in the back of the palate. It rounds out flavor. It's kind of like thyme in the cooking world. No one ever eats something and go, oh, that's lovely thyme flavored chicken soup. But if you didn't have thyme in it, it would fall a little flat. And if you don't want that citrus flavor, nutmeg is a brilliant way to sort of build in flavor, and it's so cheap. And just like a little quarter teaspoon can replace half a teaspoon of vanilla easily. Butter, well, butter's butter. I've got WhatsApp groups we share with my my Niagara friends, so when butter goes on sale in our area, it's like we're all going. And I'll get rain checks for the butter, I don't care, bulk up on butter. Chocolates, chocolate counts, but I'll pick my recipes carefully, but I won't skimp on good quality cocoa powder. Cocoa powder is far more affordable, and that can really make a good impact on your chocolate desserts. So what cookie would I eat for breakfast? I think I would go. I'm trying to think which book it's in. It's in Baking Day that you have right there. The chocolate chewy molasses cookie. Just because of the memory I associate with it, it was one of those things where I was doing an early commute to Toronto for something that just way too much traffic. I'm cranky, it's raining, but I have time to stop for a coffee, and I walk into this coffee shop, independent, and the smell of chocolate and molasses baking at the same time and ginger really hit me. And I bought this cookie and it was still warm. And I was like, I need to make this cookie. And it was the very first recipe I tested for that book. And so that is the cookie I want, but it has to be warm.
Yes.
Hello. Last time you were here, you commented that you would probably never judge a cooking competition. And I'm curious what's special about the chocolate showdown.
And I'm eating my words, aren't I? Never say never. And thank you for coming back. That is a valid and good question to ask. I have only judged 2 shows, and it was an intentional choice because I have been asked to judge other shows and I have turned them down. I chose those 2. The first was Junior Chef Showdown, which is actually airing on Netflix right now. And it's kids who have come up to me and I've realized this. It's because they're kids and they're just the sweetest. And the judging, of course, was as positive as it could be. And just to be able to encourage those little people. And what I learned is kids are much better at losing than adults. Oh, well, because everything is a learning curve for them. And so they're just used to that. And so, you know, of course, if you break someone's heart when you have to send them home that day, but 10 minutes later, you're out in the parking lot, bye, Chef Anna. They're perfectly fine. Great Chocolate Showdown was a choice. So interestingly, the company behind it, it's this power couple, and the woman, Tanya Linton, was the brains behind my very first show, Sugar. And so when she brought it to me as a concept, they said, you know, this is a show for home bakers. We're focusing, we're trying to convince the network we can do a show about one ingredient. We want it to have a learning curve to it, and we want our bakers to succeed. And so when they included in the episode that lesson, kind of like that Great British Bake Off lesson that teaches both you, the viewer, so you better understand what you're seeing. You're not just watching sprinkles flying, you understand what's behind what they're doing. I thought, okay, I think I can handle that. And what you don't see on camera, because of course they have to edit everything down, it takes us 2 days to shoot one episode because it's exhausting. The bakers can only do 1 bake in a day. So even though you see in the show they do 2 bakes, we have to spread it up to give them a break. But we spend about 40 minutes with them when we're evaluating to give them real honest, because these are people who they've gone through this effort of separating themselves from their family for 6 weeks to be with us. We owe them some time. And so I feel like that helps with that growth arc you see between episode 1 and episode 8 when it's the final competition, because they've had a chance to absorb and learn so much. So I hope that explains appropriately. But I am picky that way.
And we do have time for one more question before we go to closing comments.
And if I may, you're welcome to ask questions when we do the signing. If there's a question you didn't want to ask in front of a large group, I'm happy to indulge.
Is there a public question out there somewhere? Yes.
Hi, Anna. Whenever I travel in Canada, I always go look for restaurants that I've heard about or chefs that I've heard about. So when you go home from Winnipeg, are there restaurants here or chefs here that you like or admire? What do you talk, what do you say about Winnipeg when you go home?
I am here for such a short time, but before we started, that was a question I had put to Eva, is where should I go eat? Because I don't plan on being away from Winnipeg as long this time. And you had suggested the combo
We were talking about Shirley's Baby. They're doing some fun stuff these days. And just South Osborne is a great hub for food. You've got the Exchange District, Sargent Avenue. Like there's so much fun food to explore in Winnipeg, in my opinion.
which inspires me to come back sooner.
You should.
And then I was sharing my husband's family, while he grew up in Saskatchewan, he's of Icelandic heritage. And so we have to at some point go to the Gimli.
Oh, you got it.
How do you pronounce it? How do you say it? Thank
There we
you.
go.
Yeah.
I'll drive you, I got that.
Okay, thanks. That was a very good question to ask. I have plans.
So now I'll turn things over to both of you if you have any closing comments.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the conversation and thank you for this cookbook and looking forward to the next one.
No, and my pleasure, and thank you for your thoughtful questions that made for sometimes some longer answers than maybe you might have hoped, but it's been my pleasure visiting with you today. And I look forward to saying hello in person, and who knows, maybe we'll be traveling together someday. Wouldn't that be amazing? Thank you for your time this evening.
Huge thanks to both of you. So now at this point, my colleague Chris is going to escort Anna over to the signing table. We'll go over signing procedure with you all.
There's a procedure.
I'm going to get you to applaud for her again as well, but if you'd like to applaud as you love as well. So yes, as mentioned, we will be moving along to the signing now, so we'll ask you all to remain in place just while she gets situated. At that point, I'll then wander up to the line and I'll write your names inside the books on Post-it notes, just to ensure you can spend more time chatting when you get to the table than just spelling. Please feel free to get a copy of the book or any of her books that we have here signed before you pay for them. Just please do remember to pay for the books before you leave the store. We'll be very, very grateful. And if you are unable to stand for an extended period of time, please just flag that to either myself or a bookseller, and we'll be sure that we'll just move you a little bit further up, and we'll beg everybody else's indulgence on that point as well. Many thanks. We're so very grateful to Eva Wasney for coming on board to host this event. The minute we were told that we wanted to have a conversation with Anna, we immediately thought of her, and as you can all see, that certainly paid off. So we're thrilled that she came on board tonight, and so very grateful to Appetite by Random House for publishing this book and making this evening a possibility. Thank you all for being here, for all of your thoughtful questions, and for your support. We're so genuinely appreciative. And have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you again.